Good afternoon. This is Susanne Hill from the Citizen Body. This is our podcast, or what we also like to refer to it as the Bodycast. With me today is Adam Greenstein, and he is an advisory board member from the Citizen Body. Adam comes to us with a liberal arts education, psychology major, and he majored in biology, physiology, and history. Primarily, he's worked for many years. You said from 1985, I think, towards this current year, 2020, in the mental health industry and human services. And you've also operated a delivery business. In that time, also, you've become and operated a business for massage therapy. So you come to us with a lot of experience in some very varied fields, which is wonderful. What you also focused on in your work in mental health was also teaching communication skills and teamwork. And I want to talk to you a little bit more about that today. So how you doing?
And I'm doing great. It's nice to see you. I did want to use the experience of teaching mental health staff about engagement with the individuals they served and teamwork with people on their team at their program, and then also the importance of talking with people in other agencies. Those were the aspects of what I taught, but the same skills apply to something that we're trying to teach with the Citizen Body. One of the issues that we see in society, and has certainly been borne out in the most recent electoral cycle, is that people tend to argue a lot and have difficulty coming to both understanding and compromise when they're talking about issues of great emotional weight to them. It's been interesting to watch the American public become much more involved in politics over the last 4 years. That's, I think, evidenced by the number of people who came out and voted. So we see this as an opportunity to work with people to help them to improve their interactions and their gaining of information from others, because so much of the information we're bombarded with each day gets passed along, whether it's on social media or over a cup of coffee during conversation or whatever. And one of the things that we're trying to help people to do is to kind of back up a little in those discussions and make sure that they're a discussion and not a debate. The difference that I'm drawing there is that in a debate, you have a winner or a loser. And in the type of discussion that we're encouraging, there's not a winner or a loser. There's an exchange of information and a discovery about where the other one is coming from, so that we can make informed, intelligent decisions, not just about how we see the person giving us the information or the organization providing the information, but also what we see as truth in our world and what is important to us. So
then how does this relate to the Citizen Body? So we should probably talk a little bit about what the Citizen Body is.
Exactly. And so, as you know, the Citizen Body is an analogy that compares all of humanity. All of us are members of the citizen's body as of birth. Each of us is representative of an individual cell in a human body. So for instance, if I work driving long haul trucks, I might be a cell that is in the analogy to the circulatory system. I'm carrying the energy and the food around the body and providing it to the other cells. The same could be said with almost any job that we have. You can fit it into one of the 11 major organ groups of the body, which I learned about during my massage school teaching. The nervous system, to me, is in a lot of ways that's the way the body communicates. Electrical impulses go from one cell to another cell along a chain, and by doing that, information gets passed and action gets taken. So what I'm looking to discuss today is, how do we improve that flow of information within the body? The goal, of course, of the Citizen Body as an organization is to encourage balance and more healthful interaction in this case of this particular body cast, but in general, empowering the individual cells to be as healthy and as well balanced as they can be, because the more individual cells that are healthy, the healthier the body good Adam, as a whole operates. And the goal is to help the body to function in the healthiest possible way, just as the human body does it on its own. All, whoever designed or created us made it so that we are an enclosed, functioning entity that relies on a lot of teeny parts to work. And some of those parts are very specialized. A lung cell is designed to do what it does in the lung. A nervous cell is designed to transmit the electronic information. The same occurs in the work we do in the population as part of the citizen body of people. So what I'm looking to do is provide an idea about strengthening how we can all serve to communicate with the cells that we're interacting with, as well as with the overall body by doing that communication. Kind of clear up some of the blockages that we're experiencing in our society right now.
Yeah, and that's basically what the mission of the citizen body is to do, is to kind of provide a place where we can dialogue, learn, exchange information, and really, kind of focus on what kind of diet are we feeding our body. So, and that's the news media, social media, our interactions with each other, people that we may or may not agree with. How do we handle those interactions so that they become something that's productive for both parties?
Exactly.
So, yeah. So you were talking about the circulatory system as being a place where everything kind of gets transferred from place to place, and it's a great place to start. And our heart is the pump of that circulatory system, and if there is a disease or a problem with the heart, then it really impacts so many other organs, just because that's what's pumping the blood, and the blood is pumping life into our bodies.
And to extend the analogy to our society, assume, let's say, politics and the way that our government is designed is one of our organ systems as a nation. And if that organ isn't functioning well and it's not able to communicate with itself and with the external parts of the body, what it ends up doing is interfering with the progress that the whole makes. As a simple example, when our government representatives can't decide on the national budget, and we have a national budget shutdown, and we've had that happen a couple of times over the past several years, that slows everything else in the body down. The money isn't traveling to help fuel the rest of the economy. The things that need to get done get slowed up. So to solve that issue, we'd love to be able to help people to do, as you said, a more productive dialogue, rather than a debate where one is right or the other is right and nobody can meet in the middle. We want to encourage a discussion, a dialogue. And that's why we call it Discovery Dialogue. Now, one of the things I used to teach is that stress impacts how we deal with others and how we deal with our communication. And of course, we live in a stressful world. So we get an overload of information. We have an amazing amount of things to address each day in our daily lives. This causes us to worry about things. When we're worried, we don't listen as well. So often you may find yourself talking to somebody and your mind strays to, what are you doing after the conversation? Or you let yourself worry about, what am I going to say in response, before you've even finished listening to them. And so one of the things we'd like to help people to do is to take a step back, give themselves the time to listen to the other, and then make a better response on their part, because it will be more connected to what the other thought. So the difficulty when you're dealing with an issue that's of great emotional weight to somebody, let's say that I am a very strong believer that only one particular type of apple is good. And then I have a discussion with somebody about which apples do we like. And they're suggesting 3 other brands of apple. I may feel threatened because I strongly believe only my apple is good. This may be a little bit esoteric and strange to say it this way, but when I feel threatened, I tend to put up a block to the information coming in. I am fearful. Maybe the reason they're telling me that the other apples are just as good is my apples are sold out at the store. Or maybe they're trying to take away my apples. So I become fearful. And then maybe I start getting angry in response. Fear tends to result in anger. There's that fight or flight thing. So a lot of times in conversations, something goes on in the back of our mind where we feel threatened by what's being said, by the information being shared. When that happens, our natural reaction is to push back and to try and prevent absorbing that information or to fight against it because of the fear of what it might change that we don't want to see changed. One of the things discovery dialogue does is it asks people to take a moment, recognize what's happening in themselves, as well as in the other person in the conversation, and take that step back. Take what we call an alien perspective. Look at it from the outside. Don't have, what's that old phrase? Don't have your emotional skin in the game. So if you don't have an emotional investment in agreement or disagreement, but rather are just looking to talk about something, it's a lot easier and safer to have that conversation. Okay. One of the things that we worked on in my communication skills class is the concept of each of us having a filter. So I come with my particular filter based on what I value in life and what information I've gained and absorbed and believed in the time I've been around. So as an example, I may come from the filter of people with curly hair are the best people. And therefore, you who has straight hair, I shouldn't listen to you as much. Well, there you go. Now you're there.
A little bit.
So, yep, curly and wavy haired people are the smartest. So when a straight haired person talks to me, I'm not listening to them as much because I have a pre-built filter that says curly haired people have better brains. It's obviously not true, but if I grew up thinking that or that was told to me repeatedly, it's going to be very hard for me to let go of that bias. And so a large part of discovery dialogue is knowing your bias and pulling back, making yourself pull back from it.
Yeah.
Does that make any sense the way I'm saying that? Or all right.
It does. It actually makes me bring up something that I watched last week, and John and I had talked about the alien perspective briefly in our last bodycast, and there was an incident. Are you familiar with the college admissions scandal?
Yes.
With USC. And I think it was last week. So we are in December of 2020. We are, I guess, 9 months into a pandemic where, people have been very isolated and very, cut off from our usual normal way of society. And we're finding new ways to do things. Like you and I are having this discussion on Zoom, where if we had started our bodycast about a year ago, we would probably be in the same room and chatting in front of a camera and not doing it this way.
Exactly.
Anyway, getting back to the USC admissions scandal, I wanted to hear what was being said from the point of view of the young girl that this happened. That was, Olivia, her name is Olivia Jade. She is Massimo Giannulli and Lori Laughlin's daughter. Her parents just recently reported and are serving their sentences in prison currently. And they are, she's been very quiet throughout this whole thing. And I was always wondering, what does she have to say? She was on a program called Red Table Talk, which is Jada Pinkett Smith, so a Hollywood actress, her mother, and her daughter. So 3 generations of women from a very different demographic. 3 Black women. This Olivia, believe she approached them and wanted to speak with them and tell her side of the story. So that's where she chose to go. Jada Pinkett Smith's mother was very vocal about how she felt about this young girl using their platform. And she didn't think that she should be on their show. She didn't feel that it was her place to educate or raise this girl Olivia's consciousness about the unfairness that she perceived that she was dealing with. I
Now,
actually used the alien. Go ahead.
if I can interrupt that for a moment, you're pointing out that filter on the part of the person who felt my platform isn't appropriate
Yeah.
for you to be learning about your entitlement, I suppose, in going to college without the credentials to do so correctly.
Yeah.
And what's wonderful about that is, assuming that the show went well, and I didn't see it, hopefully that person can let go of that filter to hear what the young lady had to say and to be able to incorporate that information. Doesn't mean that she has to agree with it, but to be able to take it in is a very important part of being a functioning, healthy part of the citizen body. I'm sorry, I cut you off when you were talking about the
No, that actually segues well into my next point, which was she did talk. They did choose to have her on the show, even though the mother really strongly objected to having her on in the first place. I think there was also taking a step beyond that. There was some talk about, was she just using them to kind of redeem herself? Or what was her motive for coming on and going to their particular platform. I kind of entered it with my bias. I wanted to hear from Olivia Jade because my bias to that was I was thinking as somebody who actually rowed and has been on a rowing team, and I know the level of work and commitment that takes, and that when they were talking about she and her sister were, posing as recruits for the rowing team. And they were saying they didn't really understand what was happening. They didn't know. And I'm thinking, well, you posed for pictures in front of a rowing machine. What did you I wanted to get what her thoughts were where was this coming from? Where did you think those pictures were going? How did you think you were getting into college? And it was interesting to actually watch the show. First, I wanted to watch it in its entirety, use alien perspective and see it from start to finish and try to just release my bias and take in the information. And it was hard to do because in my head, I want to hear the answer to my question.
I'm sure.
And it was tough to do.
And having had the experience of having been on a rowing team, knowing the effort that you put in, my guess is that there's some bias against the fact that these people lied about that experience in order to help them be in college.
Yeah.
And so that would be very difficult because you have an emotional stake in the answer.
Yeah.
You want to hear that they were wrong because you feel that, and understandably so. But to be able to take the perspective that I'm watching it from outside and my emotions aren't involved, you're right. That's an incredibly difficult task. It takes practice.
Mm-hmm.
I try and practice that on a regular, ongoing basis.
Yeah, I used it as a chance. I thought of as exercise and let me practice trying to do that and releasing, where my thoughts are and where I want to see what questions I want to see answered. And I thought she did a very good job. I think the young girl was very admirable in the way that she, said, hey, yeah, I know I was wrong. I didn't see my own privilege. I was so blind. I've heard about privilege, but she never applied it to herself. And she really came on and acknowledged. It was also admirable the way that, the three women at the table also, they took her into their environment and they seemed to, want to try to release their biases and learn from her. Jada Pinkett Smith had said, she's like, I don't want to do to her what somebody else did to me. I want to practice compassion, and I want to listen to what she has to say. Even though she may or may not agree with her, she wants to at least show her the compassion, and, you know, that she has a listening ear, and that she's not affected by the way that she may have been treated in the past by other people. And it was, when I first tried to watch it, I went on, I went on to YouTube, and everything I got was somebody else's take. I got a lot of edited clips here and there. And eventually I finally found the actual thing from the actual interview from start to finish, where the women talked about, you know, their potential biases for not having her on. They had her come out, they did the interview in their entirety, and you saw the whole thing for the 20 minutes that it was. And it was interesting to watch that after having watched some of the edited and cut up versions. And that kind of goes back to the citizen body and the diet that we're being fed, and recognizing, hey, there's a lot more to just maybe the 3 vegetables that they threw on our plate. Maybe there's 20 that are going to make this a complete meal.
And you're exactly right that the process that editors do when they decide what news we're given and how a particular video clip is presented is them kind of deciding which piece of this informational food is healthy for our body and our brain. And one of the things that I try always to do is exactly what you did, which is look at what the original source was. Because if you can see what happened on either side of that little video clip, you've got a more full picture of what was being said.
Yeah.
Other people provide us with context that we can provide for ourselves. But when we're having an interchange with somebody, there's not always the time to pull up that original information that they're commenting on. And so part of what we do in discovery dialogue is we attempt to establish the agreement, first of all, that we're having a dialogue. This is not one of us trying to sell their point of view, but rather we're both sharing our point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And that just because mine is different from yours doesn't mean that we're needing to be on the defensive about it. Because I don't want you to believe what I believe. I just want you to understand what I believe and respect it. And in order to do that, part of the job of a person who's trained in this is to provide a non-judgmental way of talking with each other. A good interviewer does that. So as part of the process, the way that we're seeking to solve this ailment of dissension and anger in conversations is that we're looking to install more of what we call the discovery dialogue, more of a more neutral approach, a willingness to take in information even if it causes disagreement and dissonance to us because we believe something different, and a willingness to exchange that with another without it being an attack on each other. You know, this is sometimes difficult to do. And again, it depends a lot on how emotionally connected a person is to the point that's being discussed.
Yeah.
Having a conversation with a person living at a homeless shelter about policies regarding homelessness is very different from having a conversation with a person who owns a house. They have very different perspectives on exactly the same information. And it's important when talking to those people to hear their different perspectives. Is it, can we do the station identification break for now and come back?
Yep, I'd be happy to. So just to let people know that we are listening or watching the Citizen Body Bodycast, and I'm Susanne Hill with Adam Greenstein today. And if you want to find more information on the Citizen Body, you can go onto the internet for www.thecitizenbody.com, and you will find our website, which basically explains the values, the mission, what the Citizen Body is. And also, I believe there is now a place to donate because we are a startup and we're looking to fundraise a bit. So you can get more information and also have a place to help us out with that. So Yeah.
And,
So as we were continuing, we were talking about some of the illnesses that obstruct our society.
mhm.
So we
and
go ahead.
the illness that we discussed was, of course, that of the difficulty of dissension and anger in conversation, and the overload of information, and how do we sort through that and cooperatively address issues that are mutually of interest.
Yeah.
One of the ways that we do it is through what we're discussing, which is the discovery dialogue process, and that process involves a couple of steps. There's the step we've already identified of taking an alien perspective, looking at it as though you're somebody looking from the outside in to the conversation. The other piece that is very important in discovery dialogue is what we call active uncertainty. That I may get information today that could very well turn out to be inaccurate tomorrow, and I'm never really sure. It's part of life that we don't know for sure about a whole lot of things. So rather than assume that what I heard today is truth forevermore, I put it aside as information that I'm unsure of. Again, it's a difficult exercise mentally because people like to think in certainties. I am certain that today the sun will rise. That feels good to us. It provides safety, it provides consistency. But there are a whole lot of things in life that we don't know. I don't know what day I'll die. I am uncertain about the length of my life. Nobody knows that unless they make an active choice on the day. And so we all live our lives with a certain level of trepidation and fear about when will that day come and what do I do because I don't know. And it causes a lot of us to go through our lives worrying that we're not sure of something. In the dialogue we're talking about, in the exchange we're talking about, we're asking people to embrace that natural uncertainty, to take it on and use it as an active tool so that they're not making a judgment where this is set in stone. And that's what we're trying really hard to do. One of the ways that is a way to do that is to know the filter we're coming from and to acknowledge it to the other person. So for instance, in talking about politics, I will acknowledge that my filter comes from parents who were left-leaning liberal people who were intellectuals and had advanced degrees. And I acknowledge that that's my bias, that that's what I grew up with. So when I talk to somebody who's coming from a different perspective, I know that my particular perspective may interfere with what they're saying because of how I receive it. So I need to be able to work to put that aside and also acknowledge it to the other. You know, one of the ways to do that is that we need to be cooperative in the discussion at the beginning. If you and I start talking about a subject, what's the best fast food restaurant? Okay. Are we discussing that to voice our opinion, or are we trying to convince each other to change our minds? In discovery dialogue, I don't want you to change your mind. I want you to understand what's in my mind and how I see it, and I want to understand what's in your mind. And it's a cooperative working venture between the two people. That doesn't mean I'm going to start going to McDonald's because you think it's the best. Sorry, I didn't mean to give a shout out to a particular corporation.
A large corporation.
There you go. Maybe I convince you to go to Wendy's, you know, whatever. Pick your corporation. But obviously, one of the things that we as an organization are trying to do is it would be better if you and I were talking about our local family-run sandwich shops.
Yeah. Because
that whole buy small concept, which will come up in other podcasts that we will do in the future, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
So back to the topic of, sorry about that little tangent. What is the old saying about How many hyperactive children does it take to change the light bulb? Oh, look, a squirrel. So
Yeah.
I just did that sample. Right. Sorry. So in any instance, one of the most important techniques that I always worked with staff to do is what's called reflective listening. As you're engaging with somebody in a conversation, feedback how you heard what they said. Say back to them, my understanding is that you mean this, and put it into words of your own. That gives that other person the chance to say, yes, you got my point, or no, that's not what I meant. And it gives you both a working opportunity to not let the two filters interfere with receiving the information.
Yeah.
Um, the value judgments that we make. I'm looking down at my notes. Sorry about that, folks. But the value judgments you naturally make in the course of receiving information need to be put on hold. That's the act of uncertainty. Let me give an example. I had a friend who was very poor, and one year they didn't have any money for a Christmas dinner, and she told me the story of her boyfriend shoplifting a ham so that they could have Christmas dinner. Now, my natural middle class value, my filter, is that stealing is not right and that that's a bad thing to do. Meanwhile, her filter that she discussed it from was a very happy, pleasurable memory of somebody taking a risk to provide for them to have a special meal. And so she spoke about it with a happiness and a feeling of being cared for, while I was listening to it with, how can you support this illegal activity as my filter? So we both were coming from a very different place. But what was important for me to do was to understand I was making a judgment from my side while hearing her story. Whereas, given her situation and how she was telling the story, she was viewing it from a different perspective. This is not a person, and I know her well, she does not value theft. She is as opposed to illegal behavior as I am. But that moment of time in her life, that was an act of kindness and love more than it was an act of theft. And so I had to hear her filter. I had to understand why her presentation of that was joyful,
Yeah.
even though to me it felt offensive.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. And I think also it's difficult because in our society, everybody is very, it seems to be very easily offended. And it's because we're, everybody comes to things with their own filter. And I think we've also gotten to a point where we are so inclusive that we don't, when there is something that makes you different or that makes you, it's not always celebrated, or it's not always looked at in a positive light. um, I remember as a kid being, you're excited because you got the day off for Columbus Day. I've been to history class. I've learned all about, Columbus 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, and all these other things. And I really never thought about it until a few years ago when everybody's like, you did realize that Columbus committed mass genocide and, of, indigenous peoples. And now, Columbus Day is not celebrating, same thing, Thanksgiving, those things, they come up, we learn about them later, when before you had it through a different, you had that filter, and it might have been a more pleasant place. Now we really look at trying to kind of right the wrongs, level the playing field for everybody, which is wonderful. It is what we should do, but it also
agree.
takes some individuality away.
There's certainly a movement amongst our culture to identify both good and bad things that we haven't looked at before. A lot of times we tend to focus into what we're opposed to, which is where that offense comes from. We look at, well, I'm opposed to harming the native population when you come over from Europe. Um, and we neglect to remember that this was part of the development of the country. And if you
Right.
happen to like our country or like where you live here, then you've got to acknowledge the good parts as well as the bad. One of the things is that history is often written by the what is the old quote?
The
History
winners.
is written, yes, history is written by the winners. So had the native population repelled the immigrant Europeans, I am sure the story would be told very differently.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
what I would hope is that if, with enough people learning the techniques of discovery dialogue and what the citizen body stands for, that we are all part of one family, really, one body.
Mhm. Yeah.
That by us expanding on those ideas and more people recognizing the tools and using them, that we can see both sides of these issues.
Yeah.
Even if we are a very proud Italian American who wants to celebrate Columbus Day because of the good part of it, we can respect a Native American who sees it as the beginning of oppression.
Yeah.
So everybody is entitled to their filter about the same piece of factual information.
Yeah.
Um, so the reflective listening I mentioned helps to establish that between us.
Yeah.
I'm hearing you say this thing, you're hearing me say that thing. One of the points I do want to make sure that we understand is each other's point of view. Just because I understand somebody's point of view or I take the time to be respectful of them and listen to it doesn't mean I agree with it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times in our society, we paint it as one or the other, and
Yeah.
that's not necessary. Unfortunately, that leads to the divisiveness that we talked about. That's an illness in the workings of our culture. We
Yeah.
need to reduce how divided we are because we're really not that divided.
Mhm.
The citizen body relies on universal principles that apply to all human beings. Once you walk yourself back far enough from any issue, it comes down to we are all living, breathing human beings who think. We all have a stake in how things work out. So all the discussion we do and all the disagreement we do really has the same end results in mind. You want to go back to our founding fathers of the United States? We're all in pursuit of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which, whether I pursue it by being a deli owner or being a member of the Navy or being a teacher, whatever I choose as my path is mine and mine alone. But we're all working for that same end result.
Yeah.
And
And
I
we all
think that,
come to the table with different talents that are going to, shape, the person that we are, the contribution that we make. And I think too, with discovery dialogue, in a lot of ways, like we've kind of avoided some of those topics that may offend others. Um, whether it truly is a big offense, or is it just, well, I don't want to talk about that because so and so may not like it. So and so may not like it. So then we just have extremely generic conversations where we really don't say much of anything to each other. And
nope,
I think with what we're trying to gain with the citizen body is that we find a way that we can, a safe place to communicate, that we can have those discussions, that we can bring them back, and that we can listen to each other.
that it's a safe environment for us to share ideas without harm to each other.
Yeah, it's like
Okay.
having ground rules in a sport. It's like playing a sport and having ground rules. If I'm applying the baseball rules and you're applying football rules, we're
We're
not,
not going to,
we're
we're
just a
not
bunch
going
of
to
people
work.
out on a field with a ball. Nobody knows what they're doing. But when we all have the
Exactly.
same ground rules, we know that we're playing the same sport, then
Hmm.
then things can flow.
As time goes on and as the citizen body grows as an organization, I would see us in the future doing classes on teaching these techniques so that people in different places were able to utilize them in a way that would support their workplace and their team that they work with, or their particular block in the city and how do we organize our block party, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That by providing some support to people and empowering them to use this kind of technology, what we call philosophic technology, it is an effort to help them to feel more at ease in their world, to
Mhm.
feel more productive, and to get more from it than they
Yeah.
have been. You
And
know?
I think too, a lot of corporations already do what you're talking about. They'll have different programs, training for people. Like you taught communication skills, you taught teamwork. Sometimes some companies have a structured program that they go through, and that for me to communicate with my coworker, we know what the ground rules are. We've both been to that same class, and we know how to, have an interchange. But when you leave that place stays behind at the workplace. If I come home and I do that with my partner, and he and I are having a dialogue, and if I'm like referencing something that I may have learned, he's like, what are you talking about? But
Right.
because he hasn't been through the same experience. And I think with the citizen body, we're looking at doing that for everyone, so that we can all share, and we can all you know interact appropriately in life, and be
Absolutely.
supportive of one another.
Absolutely. One of the most important things working in mental health that I learned is that everybody wants to know they're being heard.
Yeah.
People like to know that they're listened to and that they're important enough to listen to.
Yeah.
And so a lot of what we're looking to help people do is acknowledge that to each other, to
Yeah.
be able to say the reason we're having this discussion about this, the zoning ordinance that we're discussing in our community association. We're having this discussion because we respect each other's point of view, and we want to resolve how to make a decision about this particular idea of the zoning ordinance or the change to it or whatever it is that's being discussed.
Yeah.
The more effectively people communicate about things, the more productive that communication is going to be. The
Yeah.
greater the understanding we all have of each other, the more likely we are to come up with compromises that satisfy the needs of each other.
Yeah.
So, um, I'm not really sure how much further to go with this particular topic. What I'll suggest is that people should look at the website, okay, um, see what the organization is about and some of the principles and ideas that we're working from. If it's something that people feel that they can support, they should do so. Support takes many forms. People can
Mhm.
donate to help the organization to run and grow. I make that comment because today is our beginning of our first fundraiser.
Yep.
Um, People can simply participate in the organization. We have lots of different needs that people can volunteer to help with. People can simply join in on conversation, you
Mhm.
know, which is a wonderful way to go about it. We are all interconnected. If anything, social media makes that possible to do in an immediate kind of a way, the way we're
Mhm.
having this discussion.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah,
even
I'm
even further with support, if you're not if you're not certain that you are comfortable with different things, if you're still learning about it, one of our things that we talk about is shopping small, voting small, newsing small, arting small, that we're supporting smaller businesses and people who are really trying to you know make a difference in our world. And not just I mean, we all know like our big corporations that we tend to support. And why do we do that? It's out of convenience. It's out of maybe their prices are a little bit better, and they're driving the mom and pop stores out of business, and that's not what we want to see.
Well, part of the entire goal of the organization is that each and every individual one of us has the power to affect how the body works. And that the important thing is to each of us have a balanced part of our life, that we feel a balance in ourselves, but also that balance then connects to the cells next to us and the cells next to them. And that by all of us operating together to achieve, uh, how can I say it? I guess homeostasis is the
Mhm.
word.
That balance,
Um,
yeah.
the balance that is necessary to be content and to have a productive and a happy life, um, that means working together. And it often means uh, working consciously. I can unconsciously go to something that's a familiar business because it's advertised on TV.
Mhm.
But it's better if I can find my local store and go to support my local member of my community.
Yeah.
That gives them more power by being a business that stays in business, as well as gives my local community more power.
Mhm.
And it radiates like ripples as it gets going. And that's what we're working towards.
Yeah. I've always thought of it with vote. I mean, I know we just came off of a historic election. And one of the things that I think about when we're talking about elections, I feel like my vote matters a heck of a lot more when I vote for my local council person, for my mayor, because maybe my vote is one out of 700 people that vote versus, you know, millions and millions of people. My vote, like mathematically, it doesn't seem to count as much, although it does still count, but it has more of an effect in the
Yep.
on the smaller stage.
Every vote has meaning and significance. If enough of us vote for something, that something can happen. And
Yeah.
it can be that we vote to take power from the major parties and give to the minor parties. It can be that we vote for a particular change in a law. It's a matter of what we decide to do and to understand how empowered we each are to take
Yeah.
part in this process. Yep.
Yeah. And then when we're able to put those small, the smaller businesses in the forefront, that they are thriving, that they're doing better, that are, we've got more candidates with representation in our, kind of coming up in our government, then we ensure that we are being heard and that we are, we are being represented.
Yep.
You know
And it
that.
would be, if the person who is running for office understands the concepts we're talking about, they're going to take more from their constituents.
Mhm.
So it's going to be a reinforcing of all of us to do a better job. And I
Yeah.
think that's a wonderful thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And also with our citizen, what's that?
I'm going to have to go in a moment.
Okay.
I want to-
So anyway, just to kind of recap our citizen body, we're talking about some of the things that we can do to make a difference. So making a difference with each other. We can practice reflective listening, which is where you let the other person know what you've heard. So maybe that's an activity that we could practice maybe this next week or this next month when you find yourself in a situation where you are talking to someone and you want to make sure that you are understanding what their meaning is because it's important to you. Reflective listening, it gives them also that feedback loop, which is also something that our body relies on, is that feedback loop. Like we were talking about the circulatory system, the nervous system is one big feedback loop. I send a
It all
message,
goes,
the message comes back, it's interpreted, movement or sensation is monitored in response to what I've learned. And reflective
absolutely.
listening really lets us practice that. So being able to repeat back and then listen to what that other person says, because I might, as someone who was giving the information as a reflective listener, I'd say, oh, that's really not what I meant to say. That wasn't what I wanted to come across. And then that gives me the opportunity to really be heard and let my listener know, this is what I meant to say. This is what I wanted you to take away from this conversation. So we practice reflective listening, the alien perspective, which is kind of trying to remove our own filters and biases and really listen to what's being said.
Yeah.
And
Take
also,
your ego out and put it aside for the conversation.
yeah,
No?
exactly. Yep.
Yep.
And so I think that really kind of brings us to a close with our second installment of our Citizen Body podcast, or Bodycast. And why do we call it the Bodycast? If you think about what happens when you have a broken or a unstable body part, or, we're living in unstable times, what do you do to stabilize something? You put a cast on it. Podcast, Bodycast. You see where we went with that. So, but the thing is, under that cast that's trying to stabilize, all of those body cells are working really hard to repair things. And that's what the citizen body is. So, Adam, I thank you for your time today. This was a wonderful discussion.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah. And so to learn more about the citizen body, the address is www.thecitizenbody.com. And we hope to see you there. All right. Take care.
Take care.